understood what God was saying. He's saying, in the middle of all this, he's now not talking to an individual as much as he is talking to the church body, okay? And he's saying, there are going to be people of low esteem. Like you, they don't talk like you, they don't look like you, they don't act like you. And through the blood of Jesus, I've leveled the ground at the foot of the cross.
Yes,
they can glory just as much. And you who think you are hot stuff, you got money, you got status, you got a good job, you dress pretty, you drive the best car, you live in a great house, you need to glory in being humiliated. Because you have to humble yourself to come to the Lord. You have to admit to him, I am a sinner. I need to be saved. And I think he was talking to the church to help them understand, when you are in the midst of a congregation and trials begin to come, or conflict comes, or divisions come, this is part of the testing and trying of the church, not just the individual. What are you going to do with this? All of us have been hurt before, and we have made bad choices. A lot of you that I've talked to that have come back, you let the enemy run you out of victory for a number of years. Raise your hands, be honest here. You let the devil run you right out of church because you were offended. I want a foundation so strong that we will say, Satan, you have no victory there. I don't care how humble the person is in their status or how rich they may be. We sat together evenly at the foot of the cross. Got it? Got it? All right. Never again are we going to allow the enemy to run us off of the road into a destructive pattern of life just because our feelings are out there or we get hurt. And some of it's valid. I'm not saying it's not valid. This is a lesson you have to learn when you're serving Jesus. You follow him, you don't follow man. You do what Jesus calls you to do, regardless of what anybody else does. Don't let anything take your ministry. Don't let anything get you off of the straight and narrow. And all of a sudden it makes sense why he popped that in right there. And then he goes on in the next verse and said, blessed, he picks right back up with the same thing. And that's what threw me. It was like, what did he put that in there for? And I think he was talking to the church, just saying, that's going to be part of your testing and your trials. That's going to be part of the storms that are going to come. That's what you need to learn to deal with. Blessed is one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive a crown of life that the Lord has promised to them who love him. Amen. Went right on with talking about testing. And when he talks about that crown of life, how many know what the crown of life represents? I'm just going to ask that real quick. Speak loudly. And if you don't, I'll have to repeat it so people on Facebook can hear. Do you know what the crown of life represents? Not a clue, huh? A lot of people think it's salvation. Nope. Can't be. You know why? Crowns are rewards. Salvation is free. Crowns were always given for rewards. Salvation is free. And so I begin to look up the crowns. The crown of life, let's see, where am I at? I'm going so fast, I'm losing myself. Is a crown of reward for accomplishing faithfully your spiritual walk with the Lord, to staying on track with him. Does that mean that we won't stumble and have detours and have to come back? No, but he's going to have a crown of life for those who persevere. Isn't that what our whole thing has been about? You have to have these trials, and as you persevere in them and gain patience, then they begin to cause you to grow and mature. Isn't that what we're studying? All right, those who will allow the trials to cause them to grow into maturity and then keep on track, there's going to be a crown of life for you when you get to heaven. And just out of curiosity, I just began to look up some of the others. The crown of life is for faithfully following through with your calling, your ministry, through thick and thin, storms or sunshine, rejection or acceptance, heartache or happiness. And it is also known as the martyr's crown. And you know, there are some people that are martyrs that don't die physically, but they give everything to Jesus. And then the other crowns, there's the crown of rejoicing and exaltation. Anybody want to take a guess what that one is? That's the soul winner's crown. The rejoicing over those who come to the exaltation that you brought somebody to experience the same life that you've had. That is available for soul winners. The incorruptible crown is for those who stand up against evil, who go out of their way to stand up against evil. The crown of glory in the Old Testament, the crown of glory was Israel. He said, you will be the crown in my diadem. You will be my crown of glory. He always talked about them being the crown of glory in the Old Testament. Faithful in the New Testament, however, it's faithful under shepherds, which means pastors, heads of homes, authority position in all works of life, those who shepherd or lead others, that they are living by example, that others can see Jesus. Make sense? That's the crown of glory. When you have fulfilled your position of authority as God wants you to, as a priest of your home, as a godly boss, as a godly wife, leading your children, whatever role of authority you find yourself in, if you will accomplish that before the Lord with faithfulness, it will bring you a crown of glory. Then there's a crown of righteousness. Those who have stood many tests and have continued, that love the Lord, and this is the thing that really makes it different. They love the Lord and are looking and longing for his returning with great expectation when we receive the crown of righteousness. Now, there's many other names for crowns, but the identification that comes with them fits under the 5 that I've just brought to you. So those are the major 5 crowns. And how many knows what's going to happen with crowns when we get up there? How many know you can't wear 5 crowns on your head? I mean, if I was so good that I got 5 crowns, if I was so good I got 2 crowns, it'd still be a little crowded if you're to wear 2 crowns, don't you think? They're to lay at our Lord's feet. It's our gift to the Lord that we will be giving. Now down in verse 13, because we've been talking about all the persecution and the perseverance that's needed and the trials and the storms and staying faithful, in verse 13 it says, when you're tempted, don't say God is tempting me. Now how are you tempted? When you get slighted, you're tempted. Kind of curdle inside. You know what I mean? Yeah, you do. When things aren't going too good at home, the finances are bad, you begin to panic. Those are all kinds of temptations. I'm not tempted to go out and take drugs and be a streetwalker. Those are not temptations that are going to come on me.
I hope not.
My husband says he hopes not. No, those are not things that Satan's going to bother with. But Satan comes as an angel of light, and he will come with what seemingly looks like a good solution to something that's bothering you. And if he can get you to follow his instructions instead of living it out God's way, you are then tempted. You are drawn aside. Tempted means to be drawn aside from the target. How many know what sin means? We've got this big, ugly thing in mind. But sin actually means if you had a big bullseye up here, and I mean a big target, and there's a bullseye in the middle, anytime you would take a dart or an arrow and shoot at that target, and if you missed the bullseye, it was considered sin in the Greek. It's missing the mark of perfection. So none of us can say that we are without sin, because none of us are perfect. And we get this big old black thing in mind when we think of sin sometimes. But as Christians, we need to understand it's the missing the mark. It may be slightly that we miss it. God's wanting to perfect our aim, and he will keep allowing trials and tests to come as he strengthens us and he perfects our aim that we can hit that target.
Yes, amen.
I don't like the repetition. I don't like going around the same mountain twice, but God's going to take you there till you learn how to handle it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So don't think you can escape it by just saying, I give up on this one, I'll go to the next one, Lord. It doesn't work that way. So here's something we have to remember. Satan is not alone in the temptation. Our sinful nature combines with Satan's tempting, and that's where sin comes from. God, in the opposite side, cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he ever tempt anyone. Now, there's a difference between testing and tempting. He will test you, and he will see the enemy tempting you, and he may not intervene because he knows he needs to leave you alone to figure it out on your own, so you will grow. If you have a child and you always a solution for them, you always cover for them, you always move the obstacles out of their way, they will not grow. It stunts them emotionally and socially. God will not stunt us. He will allow us to face these things. And so God can't be tempted, nor does he ever tempt anyone with evil. It's our own desires. Now, listen to this. I love the way the Lord gave this to me. Our own evil desires mate with Satan's devious desires. That puts it on kind of a human level where you can here. When our own evil desires mate with Satan's devious desires, our flesh then gives birth to sin. Sin is conceived, and we give birth to it. And when it's allowed to grow, it will lead us right to death. Maybe not physical death, but the death of a dream, a death of a promise, a death of a calling, a death of a friendship. When we allow our flesh to mate with the enemy's temptation, and we conceive, we will birth something that will bring death in our lives if we do not kill it. That's why the Bible says you must mortify your flesh. How often? Daily. You've got to hand every single day. And you know where the biggest thing is in the family home? Between husband and wife and mom and kids. You've got to take in your hand, take yourself in hand. Men, you are to be gentle with your wives. And never provoke your children. I think I heard that Sunday night. Right? Do not provoke your children to anger. These are all steps where we can bring death in the home when we don't learn how to mortify the flesh daily and not allow our to mate with Satan's temptation and conceive and bring forth a sin that can injure and hurt. Does that make sense?
Yes.
We need to be aware of that. We need to be on top of it. When sin is allowed to grow, it will lead to death. Then verses 16 through 18. Did I do 15? No, I don't think so. I'm just going to read the scriptures because it's kind of what I just spoke. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone, but each person is tempted when they are driven away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then after desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it's fully grown, gives birth to death. Do you see where I got that twist of sin mating with our flesh, conceiving and bearing forth the fruit of sin? Now verse 16 says, don't be deceived. Dear brothers and sisters, every good and perfect gift comes from above. Now I want to stop. Why does he say, don't be deceived?
Because some things look like it would be a good thing, and it's not.
Yes, Kathy is saying that some things look good, but they're not.
Yeah.
Satan has counterfeit. And I just stated he comes as an angel of light. So how can we know when it's not good for us? You have to stay in the Word, you have to stay in prayer, and you have to stay full of Holy Spirit. Got it? You know, I have the illustration that we are a three-part being. And if you have a table that has 4 legs and you take one leg off, if you don't put pressure in the wrong spot, you can make it look okay. Unless you put pressure in the wrong spot. But if you have a 3-legged table and you take one leg away, you cannot make that sucker stand up. It's not gonna stand up. We are a 3-part being. Honey, will you come get my phone that's ringing here? We are a 3-part being. And when you do not take care of one part of your being, you're like a 2-legged stool that somewhere you're gonna fall on your face.
It's in your purse.
Get
In your purse?
Yeah, baby, get it.
Oh, this is
My
the
husband
purse.
never gets my purse. You're throwing me for a loop, Pastor Charles. This is a funny routine. Huh?
It's God.
Just go back. God's calling. Anyway, if you take one of those ingredients out of the 3-part being, body, soul, and spirit, you say, well, how do I do that? Your body, I'm being told to go back to the mic. Sorry. If you're a 3-part being, your body needs the fellowship of one another. That's the physical part. And your soul needs the worship and the prayer and the word. Or your spirit needs the word. The spirit needs the word. And the soul needs the worship and the prayer and the physical fellowship. You leave out fellowship, Bible, or prayer in your life, I guarantee you're going to get to conceiving some sin with the devil. You can't make it, folks. I don't care how sanctimonious you get. You neglect the Word of God, you neglect prayer, and you neglect the gathering of yourselves together. God did not create isolated beings that serve God on our own. He created us for communication, and the thing that was lost in the garden was God no longer came and talked with them. They lost the communication. When Jesus came and made us new creatures, he made that spirit come alive that can communicate with heaven now. He made that part that was dead. See, the spirit in us died. We stayed physical and we stayed soul. But when sin entered the world, we died spiritually. But when Jesus comes and makes a new creature, the spirit stays alive and it has to be fed. So God didn't intend you to just live as a spiritual being here on earth. He created you to be physical. He created you to be emotional. He created you to be spiritual. Am I duplicating that? Physical, spiritual, and emotional. All those areas. And it's all fed and kept healthy by Bible, by reading the Word, or by prayer, the Word, and fellowship. I want you to say that, fellowship. Fellowship is so important. Those out there that are watching us, I would just encourage you, if you are not in church somewhere, you are not in fellowship, you're missing out on so much that God has for you.
Yes.
The fellowship of one another, the strengthening of one another, the word and the prayer and the worship that is part of feeding your soul. I would just encourage you to think again about that. So let's go on here. The fruit of the lips, I went to James. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights. There it is again, telling us who he is. He's the Father of the heavenly lights. What are the heavenly lights? The stars, the moon, the sun. All the planets that are circling out there that are reflecting his light. He's the Father of them all. He's all in control. He doesn't change like a sifting shadow. How many have noticed that as much as you love your friends and those that you look up to, sometimes they can shift a little on you and it'll throw you a little bit. Because they're human.
Yeah.
But God never does.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't shift. There's no shadow in him. You can trust him. It goes back to that. You've got to have the faith to believe and proclaim it, even in the moments when you don't see it, because you know who your Father is. Do you know your Father? That's the key. Do you know your Father? You get to know him through this word. You get to know him when you feel the presence of God. The last 2 Sundays, we've had a rich sense of his presence. You get to know him when you sense that. And you know, when we're together like that, there is an evidence of his presence that you don't get anywhere else except when you are gathered together.
Right, right.
There's a demonstration of his presence when we are together worshiping him. And I want to tell you, he wants us to know him. He wants us to know who he is. And then he says, he chooses to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruit of all he created. He told us in Corinthians that we've become new creatures. He's given us birth. And when he says first fruits, did you know the children of Israel, when they brought their offerings, were commanded to bring their first fruits to God? First fruits are special. God is saying, I created you, gave you birth, and you are special.
Yes.
I am telling you, you are special. And that brings us to the end of chapter 1. Next week, we're going to start on chapter 2. I hope those of you who are watching us on Facebook or YouTube, that you will come and join us again as we start in James chapter 2. And the title of that will be Listening and Doing. How many know you can listen and not do? And you can do without listening. Either one's going to get you in trouble. So we're going to start there next week. Hope you can join us. God bless you until we meet next week.
Amen. Amen.
Hallelujah.